Good morning. I'm Kathy Chase, President of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. On behalf of the Planning Committee, I would like to welcome you to the 37th Annual Lifesavers National Conference on Highway Safety Priorities. I'm honored to serve as the Master of Ceremonies for this morning's opening plenary session. It's early on a Sunday morning here in Louisville, home of Churchill Downs. To help us get us in the spirit, I thought I'd wear a hat worthy of the Kentucky Derby, along with the Bugle Serenade. Lifesavers' very own call to the plenary was played by Steve Buttleman, one of the most recognized trumpet players in the world. He is the official bugler of Churchill Downs and has held this position for the past 23 years. He also holds the distinction of being the only bugler to perform at all 3 Triple Crown races. And he was in the movie Secretariat. Please join me in thanking Steve for performing for us this morning. This is the first time that Lifesavers has been held in Louisville, and we're excited to be here. We hope you'll have time to experience some of Louisville's famous attractions, such as the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory and the Muhammad Ali Center, as well as catch some bluegrass music. And then there's the infamous beverage in a barrel, which of course should never be paired with driving. Most importantly, Louisville is committed to improving safety on their roadways as a zero fatality city and a member of the National Road to Zero Coalition. The city's initiative is led by an interdepartmental and interdisciplinary team that meets monthly to implement a data-driven road safety plan. This plan leverages the 4 E's of traffic safety to address high-risk, high-crash locations so that all roadway users in the Louisville metro area arrive at their destination safely. And I'm pleased to announce that just last week, Governor Matt Bevin signed a bill making Kentucky the 33rd state to enact an all-offender ignition interlock law. No life should be lost on any roadway in any community. Lifesavers, just like the Louisville and state of Kentucky, is committed to zero fatalities. And the Conference Planning Committee has worked diligently to make that a focal point of the more than 80 workshops taking place over the next 2.5 days. Because Lifesavers is a safety conference, I must take a moment to ask each of you to locate the nearest exit here in the ballroom. I also encourage you to review the Convention Center's emergency plan, which can be found on the Lifesavers app. In the event of an emergency, please follow the directions of the Convention Center staff. Also, if you see anything suspicious, other than my hat, report it to the Convention Center staff member or one of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet volunteers at the registration area or in the workshop rooms. I also recommend that you acquaint yourself with your hotel's emergency exits and action plans. Now, let us officially kick off the 37th Annual Lifesavers Conference with the presentation of our nation's colors by the Northern Kentucky Regional Honor Guard, under the command of Fort Wright Police Sergeant Jonathan Colwell. Please stand. Please join with Kentucky State Trooper Courtney Milam in the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please join me in thanking the Honor Guard again and Trooper Milam. Please be seated. As the granddaughter of a police officer and the daughter-in-law of a brigadier general, I hold these callings in the highest regard and would like to ask you to join me in thanking all law enforcement and military personnel in the room today for your service. Please stand and be recognized. The Lifesavers Conference is a nonprofit entity that wouldn't happen without the support of sponsors and exhibitors. Our sponsors were displayed on the video screens as you entered the ballroom this morning. We want to thank all of the businesses and organizations that are here supporting the 2019 Lifesavers Conference and for their commitment to saving lives. I encourage you to take a moment over the next 2.5 days to personally thank these sponsors and exhibitors, and please join me now in giving them a well-deserved round of applause. This past Friday, Lifesavers held a community event at Engine 19 to commemorate the first time Lifesavers is being held in Louisville and to create awareness of the work being done here in the metro area and in communities across the nation by all of you to keep people safe. At this event, Lifesavers Board Chairman John Olszewski joined with Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher, Kentucky Office of Highway Safety Executive Director Jason Sawala, and Sharon Ranger, coordinator of the state's Child Passenger Safety Program, to call attention to two critical focus areas: pedestrian safety and occupant protection, both of which impact children, some of our most vulnerable roadway users. These focus areas were selected in consultation with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, our hosts for this year's conference, and here's why. A third of Kentucky's pedestrian fatalities happen in Louisville, and 83% of the crashes occur after dark. To help the city address this problem, Lifesavers donated $5,000 to the Look Alive Louisville program to purchase reflectorized items such as neon zipper pulls, which can be attached to jackets and backpacks, and lights, which include safety tips in both English and Spanish. These will be distributed to children and adults at schools and community-based events. Last year, 9 children died in motor vehicle crashes in Kentucky, 4 of whom were either not riding in a child safety seat or in seats that were installed improperly. And here in the metro area, motor vehicle crashes have already claimed 2 young lives this year. At Friday's community event, Lifesavers donated $10,000 to Norton Children's Hospital, which coordinates the state's CPS program to help purchase child safety seats for families without the financial means to do so. Immediately following these check presentations, Safe Kids Worldwide, a Lifesavers Planning Committee member, and the National Child Passenger Safety Certifying Body partnered with Norton Children's Hospital, the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety, and certified CPS technicians from the Louisville metro area to conduct a child safety seat check. The site for the event was chosen due to the proximity of a preschool, neighborhood center, and elementary school. More than 50 families took advantage of this life-saving free service. Would those of you who are involved in Lifesavers community events please stand and be recognized? Lifesavers looks forward to partnering with our state hosts in the future to conduct similar community events at conferences. Continuing our recognition of the importance of child passenger safety, I would like to call to your attention to the big screens. Please join me in congratulating the 2019 Child Passenger Safety Instructor of the Year, Mauricio Hoya, Latino Project Manager for the Automotive Safety Program at the Indiana University School of Medicine in Indianapolis, Indiana. And the 2019 Team of the Year, Safe Kids Greater Houston, Texas, which is led by Texas Children's Hospital. The 2019 Technician of the Year award was posthumously presented to Jennifer Pennick, who worked with Car Seats for the Littles in Omaha, Nebraska. Tragically, Jennifer and her husband Adam were killed in a motor vehicle crash last June. The Pennicks are survived by their 5 children, who, along with Jennifer's parents, accepted the award yesterday afternoon at a Lifesavers pre-conference meeting. Lifesavers congratulates this year's award recipients and their families. I would now like to welcome our first speaker, who has made serving the citizens of Kentucky his calling for more than 30 years. Greg Thomas began his career as a technical engineer for Kentucky Utilities. Over the years, he held many diverse positions, culminating with Vice President of Distribution Operations and Energy Delivery at Louisville Gas and Electric. His responsibilities have included the safe, reliable, and strategic operation of the statewide electric distribution system and related regulatory and compliance functions, including those overseen by the Department of Transportation. In 2016, Governor Matt Bevin tapped Greg to serve as the Secretary of the Kentucky's Transportation Cabinet. A graduate of the University of Tennessee and Leadership Kentucky, Greg lives here in Louisville with his wife, Luann, and their sons, Will and Gus. Please give a warm welcome to our host, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet Secretary, Greg Thomas.
Thank you, Kathy. Well, good morning. And on behalf of the governor and the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, welcome. Welcome to Kentucky and welcome to Louisville. Now, you can say Louisville, You can say Louisville, and that's okay, but they will say you're not from around here. So, do we have any March Madness fans in the crowd? Okay. Well, being from Tennessee, alum from Tennessee, I've been significantly reduced at this point. My wife, though, bleeds blue, and my children bleed blue, which speaks to my leadership ability. But so my wife's watching the games, and I'm watching the Charles Barkley commercials. So, well, I had to confess, when I first was invited to open a conference on a Sunday morning here in downtown Louisville, my mind went back over the 30 years and most of the conferences I attended. But then as I learned a little more, I realized that this is just not another conference, you know. So when Kathy mentioned my electrical background, when you're in that world, our technicians work on voltages that really doesn't provide a second chance. And so in that world, safety becomes top of mind. It becomes the culture. It becomes a relentless pursuit of identifying and mitigating hazards. And so this conference really tapped into my passion, which is keeping people safe. And so when I realized that this is the largest gathering of safety professionals in the nation, and I realized what we could really learn from you, it's exciting to me, because unfortunately, we're in I guess the 5th highest in the nation in terms of fatality rate. And so we've got a lot to learn. Our trend is improving year over year. Fatalities are down, but as you know, one fatality is one too many. So we're doing I think a lot of things right. Where you heard about the ignition interlock legislation that was passed. We're partnering with many folks. We have adopted a scoring model for all of our highway projects across the Commonwealth, and have made safety a high priority in that model as well. And then it's just partnering, I think, and working with everyone and this conference is exciting to me in terms of sharing best practices. So, you know, this conference can actually save lives, and so that's why it's important. That's why I want to just thank you for all that you do, and again, welcome to Louisville. Thank you.
It's a very big stage. Thank you so much, Secretary Thomas, for being with us here today. We appreciate all the time and effort you and your staff have committed to making this year's Lifesavers Conference a success. And we congratulate you on the downward trend in traffic fatalities statewide. You've heard about Louisville and Kentucky's efforts to achieve a zero fatalities goal. The strategies and tactics that they're using can and are being applied in cities and states across the country. Law enforcement is key to this effort. That is why Lifesavers invited Chief Steve Katz-Stevens, the incoming president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, to share his thoughts regarding what it will take to achieve zero and what his organization, IACP, is doing to advance that goal. A law enforcement veteran with more than 30 years of experience, Steve currently leads the Buffalo Grove, Illinois Police Department. He has also provided traffic safety technical assistance to Allstate and the National Safety Council, and was a member of the select team of law enforcement professionals tapped to develop a highway patrol and training academy for the nation of Qatar. Steve earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice management from Judson University. He is also a graduate of Northwestern University's School of Police Staff and Command and the FBI National Academy. Additionally, Steve is a certified police chief through the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, a friend to Lifesavers, and a frequent attendee Please welcome Chief Steve Castevens.
This is a big stage. Okay, big green button you said, right? Good morning. When I'm not fighting crime, I drink Starbucks. So, very happy and honored to be here to be able to speak. It's been a few years since I've been to a Lifesavers conference. Remember the days when I was on the Lifesavers conference planning committee. That was a great time. I enjoyed working with all the professionals back then. One thing that I'll add to the quick resume, thank you for that nice introduction, was back in the early days of child passenger safety, my instructor number was I00005. What are we up to now? So, a few quick things here. Big green button. There we go. I'm sure many of you here are like, who is this guy? I mean, that was a nice introduction, but really, what's he doing here? Who is he? So let me give you a quick little background more than you already know. So, I was born and raised in the little town of Triumph, Illinois, population 62 in corn country. Triumph's really not on a map of anything except Triumph. To give you a better idea where it's located in Illinois, kind of right around here. I went to this grade school. The building doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed. I went to this high school. That building doesn't exist anymore either. It was leveled. That says something about me. My first law enforcement job in 1976 was with the military police, 101st Airborne. I was there for 3 years. Then I worked for this place for about a year and a half. Then I worked here for about 8 months, got really bored. Then I got hired here and I worked there for 30 years and retired as deputy chief, but I still wasn't done with my career, so then I got hired as chief of police here, spent 2.5 years there. They drove me crazy, so then I took this job as chief of police in Buffalo Grove, and I've been there about 6 years. That's where I am now. I love motorcycles. What else do I love? So you already heard I attended the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. I graduated 216th course of the FBI National Academy. I was past president of the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. There's my beautiful face in the magazine to prove it. Those are my 2 deputy chiefs, so clearly this illustrates you have to be follically challenged to be in a leadership position at Buffalo Grove. In 2014, I was elected to 4th Vice President of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I'm the incoming president at the conference this October in Chicago. I have a friend who plays the bagpipes. I have another friend who plays the bagpipes. I have a lot of friends who play the bagpipes. I love dogs. I'm not a big fan of cats. However, that didn't prevent an entire family of them from invading my deck and living on my furniture for about 2 years. Aw, aren't they cute? I love wearing ridiculous outfits on the golf course because it takes people's mind away from how horrible my golf game is. That's my traditional America the Beautiful outfit. This I call my Pepto-Bismol outfit. This is my Go Cubs outfit. Cubs fans. Anybody? Well, this is special. That's only 1 day a year I wear that. I once golfed with the Three Bears. Anybody who's a Chicago Bears fan know these guys all from the '85 Super Bowl. I have a '65 Mustang Fastback, which I absolutely adore. I love smoking cigars with my friends. I love smoking a cigar with my other friends. I did not smoke a cigar with Shaquille O'Neal, but I thought it was a cool picture, so I put it in there anyway. If you want to buy me a cigar, Opus X are my favorites. And of course, when I'm not fighting crime, I drink Starbucks. I love lobsters. This is my beautiful wife. Where are you? There you are. Hi, Petey. And what you may not know about me is I've spent not 30 years, but 42 years in law enforcement, and I'm very passionate about traffic safety, and I have been for 4 decades. I do have that fever, as John Yositsky mentioned yesterday. I've had the fever on traffic safety for 40 years, and the CDC is still looking for a cure. So, this won't surprise you that I'm here then to talk about traffic safety. Why should it be a priority for law enforcement? This should be very clear to us, but it's become kind of muddled recently. I'll tell you a few things you probably should already know, discuss briefly what IECP is doing about this, and really what should we all be doing to get in the direction of zero fatalities. So, what's the biggest issue in law enforcement across the nation in the last 2, 3, 4 years, according to the media, and according to the public, and according to apparently Facebook? Yeah, I'll give you a hint. Police-community relations. This has been a huge issue in our profession for the last several years, police-community relations. Okay, this is something law enforcement needs to deal with. So let's quickly take a step back in history to 1829. Bob Jacob, where are you? You were there. Back in England, our friend Sir Robert Peel, the London Metro Police. Everybody remember Robert Peel and his, he came up with several principles of policing that are still valid today. His second principle, now think about this, to recognize always that the power of the police to fulfill their functions and duties is dependent upon the public approval of their existence, of their actions, and their behavior, and on the ability to secure and maintain public respect. 1829, still valid today. His third principle, to recognize always that to secure and maintain the respect and approval of the public means also the securing of the willing cooperation of the public in the task of securing an observance of laws. This is pretty basic, still valid today. So, fast forward from 1829 to about 10, 11 years ago. What happened in 2008? Anyone? Bueller? We had a stock market issue, right? We had a market crash. We had some serious issues in our economy. And what do you think happened to law enforcement in 2008 and a couple of years that followed that? Anybody who's in law enforcement in the room knows what happens. You saw several things happen in our profession. I saw it in my former department in Hoffman Estates where I worked at the time. All across this country, law enforcement agencies laid off police officers, or they lost police officer positions through attrition. Somebody retired, they didn't have money in the budget to hire an officer to fill that position. My department laid off 4 police officers. There were other departments that laid off 40 police officers. There were agencies that laid off 100 police officers, and to this day, never got them back. We lost in this country almost 10,000 sworn law enforcement positions out of the 18,500 law enforcement agencies in our country. Wow, that's a big hit. So not only did that happen, but law enforcement agencies started to reprioritize what their core functions were. Because my former department, for example, prior to 2008, when everybody had money and all our budgets were fat and happy, we added a lot of extra positions, community relations positions, problem-oriented policing positions. We had lots of school resource officers. We had a lot of what people would call fluff positions in our department. We didn't think they were fluff. They all served a great purpose, connecting with the community. But when departments laid off officers or lost sworn positions, what did they do? Well, they couldn't sacrifice their most core function of patrol. So they disbanded many of those positions, including our 5-person traffic unit, and folded those officers back into regular shift patrol. So a lot of agencies lost their traffic units, they lost their community relations units, they lost their problem-oriented policing units, they lost school resource officers because they were all placed back into patrol function. What do you think that did to our profession? we started losing community policing opportunities. So that's what happened to our profession. And then it shouldn't shock anyone that over the past several years, there have been issues in some law enforcement agencies with their community, and they blame it on lack of community policing. The law enforcement agency has not been connecting with their residents. Well, there are several reasons for that in many cases. Well, all of this culminated eventually in the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. Okay, what was that? Anybody read this report? Really? I'm the only one? Oh, good for you. Good for you. Give that guy an award. Interesting reading, the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. This report came up with 6 pillars and numerous recommendations for law enforcement. And pillar number 4 was very detailed about community policing and crime reduction. They go together. And you say, wait a minute, Steve, you heard about talk about traffic safety, not community policing. What's this have to do with that? Well, if we go back to 1829 and remember what Peel said, as well as a 21st Century Police Report said, we police need to work with our community in solving issues in our community. So, I ask any law enforcement person in the room, is impaired driving an issue in your community? Is distracted driving an issue in your community? Are traffic crashes an issue in your community? These are all real issues that we have to deal with. We're still sending our police officers to traffic crash scenes. That didn't stop. So the issue is still there. So if these are still real issues in our community, how are we addressing them? Isn't this really part of community policing? So let's look a little more at history. You go back to the early 80s, late 70s. Seatbelt use rate in this country was barely 20%. It's now exceeding 90% in almost every state. How did we get there? Anyone? Law enforcement knows how we got there. Of course, we got there with the 3 E's, but enforcement, and an education about enforcement. Those are the 3 E's, right? We got there, in many cases, because law enforcement was making traffic stops and telling you, put your seatbelt on. Here's a ticket. Catch you doing it again, I'll give you another one. We changed driver behavior, and we changed it through educational traffic stops. We have that opportunity, as Dr. Morris Massey once said years ago, when you have that driver's license in your hand, you can create a significant emotional event for the driver. Am I getting a ticket or not? So that's how we got there. But traffic enforcement today has kind of changed because of some of the historical reasons I just talked about, specifically the economy issue. The reality is, some officers are reluctant to make traffic stops. That's a reality. And this occurs for a variety of reasons. I say some of it is because they do not have leadership in their organization that says that this is a priority and why. I know some officers in some areas say, well, I don't have time to make traffic stop, I gotta catch bad guys. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. But some agencies are now realizing that our officers have to concentrate more on community policing. Thank you for connecting those dots. How do we do that now? Isn't traffic enforcement community policing? Of course it is. Let's talk about some of the basics. I heard somebody mention yesterday, 2017, over 37,000 died in traffic crashes, over 100 a day. That sounds like a priority to me. Is distracted driving an issue? Good Lord, I cannot count the number of people who almost run me off the road on my way to work every morning because they're on their cell phones. For those states like Illinois who are transitioning from medical marijuana to recreational marijuana, because it's coming to Illinois very soon, it's our new governor's #1 priority, he said, because he's going to balance the state's budget with it. Is this going to be an issue with combination of alcohol and drugs, polysubstance use, and impaired driving for our officers? Let's review some of the other basics. Anybody who knows me, for 40 years, I have said the following quote: "Bad guys drive cars." This is a basic in our society. Criminals come and go in cars. Nobody has walked down the streets of Buffalo Grove, Illinois after burglarizing a house with a flat panel TV on their shoulder. They come and go in cars. So people who transport burglary proceeds and burglary tools and guns and drugs and sometimes bodies in the trunk come and go in cars. So it stands to reason, if we want to do crime prevention, maybe we should make traffic stops. That sounds pretty basic to me. Study after study has shown that the first time a citizen in your community encounters a police officer is on a traffic stop, a routine traffic stop. Not because they got in a car crash, not because their home was burglarized, not for any other variety of reasons. They didn't meet them at Dunkin' Donuts. Well, they may have. They encounter them on a traffic stop. Traffic stop is community policing. I remind my officers every day, every time you make a traffic stop, that's a public service announcement for the Buffalo Grove Police Department. How you treat people on a traffic stop, how you act, the actions you take are a PSA for our law enforcement agency and for our profession. Many years ago, an executive from Disney once said, "You know, you've always heard in the business world the customer's always right." At Disney, we don't believe that at all. We believe that quite often the customer's wrong. However, we believe they're allowed to be wrong with dignity. And that's how I tell my officers to conduct every traffic stop. People are speeding, people are driving on the shoulder, people are doing stupid things. Take appropriate enforcement action, but treat them with dignity, because that's also part of community policing. At the end of the day, traffic enforcement and community policing are the same thing. You connect through your community with traffic stops, you reduce crashes with traffic stops and enforcement, you correct driver behavior, you take appropriate enforcement action. That's how we make change in our community. What else can we do? Now, there's some projects out there working on expanding the use of electronic warrants, e-warrants for blood draws on impaired driving arrests. I love this. Because right now, for one of my officers to get a warrant to do a blood draw, that's going to take me hours and hours. I love this. I'm looking forward to seeing more of this. Technology, ignition interlocks, we just heard some great news on that. So, thinking about this a different way, let's look at the basic components of our highway system: roads, cars, and people. If our roadways were perfect, if we had no potholes, if we had wide shoulders, if we had no debris in the roadway, we could reduce our crash problem by 15%. If cars were perfect, everybody had brand new brakes, nobody had tread challenge tires, we could reduce our crash problem by 5%. 80% of our problem is people. There's where we really need to concentrate our work. So how do we address this human element? Back to the basics. Education, especially on the side of the road on a traffic stop. Enforcement, second part of that. Legislation, we'll talk about things like 05 later this afternoon. That should be a great discussion. One part that I think is missing in our profession in many agencies, some are doing a great job on this, some not so much, is crash data analysis. So let's remember back to those basics of that. If it's predictable, it's preventable, right? Traffic crashes typically happen in the same manner, at the same time, in the same location. Good crash data can be used to direct future enforcement when you can see the typical violations that are occurring that cause traffic crashes at a certain location. Also good to evaluate your current enforcement work. Here's an interesting and I think disturbing trend that I've seen in many law enforcement agencies, and again, because many are understaffed. There are a lot of agencies that will only investigate an injury crash or a fatal crash. If it's a property damage only crash, oh, are the cars drivable? Yeah. Anybody hurt? No. Come on into the station, we'll have a desk officer take a report. Anybody think this is a good idea? I mean, I get it, staffing-wise, but for crash analysis, for enforcement action, for education, is this a good idea? Because really, what's the difference between a fatal crash, a personal injury crash, and a property damage only crash? If crashes, if we agree that they all typically occur in the same manner, what's the difference between any one of these? The difference really is luck. That's the only difference. 5-degree more offset, one or the other on a head-on crash. T-bone crash maybe hits the B pillar instead of the A pillar. You have a different result. So really, sometimes it's a matter of luck. So if we can agree that less than 15% of all traffic crashes are fatal or personal injury, should we be basing our crash data analysis on only 15% of the available data? No statistician will say that's a good idea. We're missing a lot of good information. I always found this interesting. There was an 1800s tax collector in England, and again, Bob Jacob, you were there. The government is very keen on amassing statistics. They collect them, add them, raise them to the nth power, take the cube root, and prepare wonderful diagrams. But you must never forget that every one of those figures comes in the first instance from the night watchman who puts down whatever he damn well pleases. We call that garbage in, garbage out. So our crash data analysis is only as good as the data we're collecting, which is why we need to collect it on all traffic crashes. And as police officers, we need to be investigating crashes, not just reporting them. Reporting is a who, what, when, and where. Investigating is determining how and why. That's a big difference. That's what we need to be doing more of. Classic example, are we doing a good job documenting crashes involving cell phone use? About 5 years ago, there was a state, and I saw the interesting, I won't mention the state, but it was very interesting. There was a news release, and they said, we compared our traffic crash data involving cell phone use for 1 year prior to passing our cell phone use ban and 1 year after. And we saw like this 70% reduction. The law is working. Really? Do you really think that when a police officer comes to the scene of a crash, somebody goes, hey, my fault, I was on my cell phone. My fault, right here. No. Nobody's admitting that they were on their cell phone and caused the crash. So is that data really reliable? There's got to be a better way for us to determine if cell phones are being used just prior to a traffic crash. I know there's some new technology that's out there on that. I'm interested in hearing more about that as well. But our officers need to be doing more investigating on this. According to Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, drivers were observed manipulating their cell phones 57% more often in 2018 than 2014. No kidding. Thanks for connecting those dots as well. So true. Let's all remember, for those of us who are not traffic crash reconstructionists, 60 miles per hour equals about 90 feet per second. So in 3.5 seconds of looking down on your cell phone, you've traveled more than the length of a football field without looking up at traffic. That's frightening. Also, according to the Insurance Institute, 800 people killed in crashes in 2017 from drivers on phones, not on a call. Anybody here think that number is probably higher? For obvious reasons we just talked about. So here's a question on technology. Should police officers be able to conduct audits of cell phones in crashes to determine if they were being used at the time of the crash? My regional traffic crash team does that, but they have to get a warrant, and they have to do a cell phone audit to see if the cell phone was being used, either text, check email, phone call, etc. But we need good data. We really don't know what these true numbers are. Another topic is a growing issue of driving under the influence of drugs, obviously. Polysubstance use, as I said, so many more states are switching to the use of, or legalizing the use of recreational marijuana. Are our officers trained? Enough officers trained? Do we have enough DREs across this nation? Absolutely not. I don't have a single DRE in my department anymore. There's not a lot of DREs in the Chicagoland area, not enough, I'll tell you that. So we need to look at more funding to train more officers in A-RIDE, DRE. What about the International Association of Chiefs of Police? Since I'm here representing them, what are we doing? For those who don't know, we host an annual conference, the Drugs, Alcohol, and Impaired Driving Conference. We also assist with the drug evaluation classification and SFST programs with NHTSA. We are a member at ICP of the Road to Zero Coalition. We are currently developing a distracted driving toolkit for law enforcement that will be coming out later this year. And we're very active with our Highway Safety Committee. The ICP has 28 different working committees. I'm proud to say the Highway Safety Committee is the hardest working committee of all of them. I sat on that committee for 15 years. Chief Danny Sharp from Oro Valley, you hear Danny somewhere. God bless you, you guys are doing great work. Very active committee. I will also tell you this, probably the first time in 50 years, every incoming IACP president has 3 or 4 priorities that the IACP will be concentrating on during the year of presidency. I am proud to say that I'm the first incoming president over 50 years that's making global road safety one of my priorities. As an example, we are currently working the ICP with the Bloomberg Foundation in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have a 3-year project in Sao Paulo working with their local law enforcement to address a problem they have in traffic fatalities. Give you an interesting snapshot of the issue in Sao Paulo, Brazil. They grew really fast as a city and they do not have the infrastructure to accommodate all the motor vehicles they have. You cannot drive your car in Sao Paulo except for certain days of the week that correspond with the last digit on your license plate. And many people have gone from motor vehicles to scooters and small motorcycles, and they lane split down the 3 main interstates, if you will, through Sao Paulo. They only have 3 main roadways in Sao Paulo. They have 19 fatal crashes a day. 85% of those motorcyclists. They have a significant traffic problem in Sao Paulo. That's an example of what IACP is doing, and I hope to do more there. So, once again, thank you for inviting me to speak. Happy to see such a packed room, and hope to see you more over the next few days. Thank you. This is not when I'm told to go to my stand-up comedy routine.
So I've been told that there may be some questions in the audience. We have a mic. If you could raise your hand if you have a question for the chief, he'd be willing to, I think, do that. Or he can turn to his tap dance routine. That's okay with you.
I can do that as well.
Thank you for being here this morning, Chief. You mentioned that not all law enforcement leadership carries in their heart the passion for traffic safety that you have. How can we help inspire and motivate law enforcement leadership to support their officers in the field in traffic safety?
It's an excellent question, and thank you. First thing it takes in a law enforcement is not just leadership, but courageous leadership. It takes a courageous leader to understand what the priorities for their agency should be. And surprisingly, and I've talked to many police chiefs, not only in Illinois, but across the nation, about, I'll call it bringing back the priority of traffic and highway safety and traffic enforcement. And to be very honest, if you look at, again, what happened from '08 to today, a decade has passed, there are a lot of new police chiefs in positions on their law enforcement agencies that weren't there prior to '08. And many of those police chiefs just were never brought up with that priority as they were coming up through the ranks. So quite often it's just very simple as finding someone in your state, like Danny Sharp in Oro Valley, me in Illinois, finding somebody who has a passion for traffic safety, but not only just the passion, but understands the nexus between traffic safety and community policing and crime reduction, and please feel free to steal my PowerPoint and show it to them, because sometimes it's just that simple. It's having that one-on-one conversation with a police chief, and this can be done at your local state chiefs of police association meetings or the regional police chiefs meetings. Somebody needs to walk in and say, listen, this needs to be a priority, this is why, this is how it can benefit your community and your law enforcement agency. Sometimes it's that simple. Thank you. So 2 Irishmen walk into a bar, neither one of them got hurt.
Jason has a question.
So obviously, Office of Highway Safety here in Kentucky, but all over the nation, partner very closely with police officers and IACP and various other policing agencies. You know, what type of things from the law enforcement perspective could be done to help strengthen and boost effectiveness of some of those relationships?
Thank you. Sometimes, you know, I hate to say this, but many times it comes down to budgets. As I briefly mentioned earlier, we don't have enough police officers in our country trained as DREs and A-RIDE and SFST for the new officers is kind of a given, but I think DRE is going to be the biggest issue, and we need to support with grants our law enforcement agencies to get more officers trained and certified as DREs, because this train is coming down the road and it's coming down fast. And more states like Illinois, I think, are ill-prepared for recreational marijuana. And, you know, I could get up here and talk for quite some time on the whole 5 nanogram issue and the lack of good science behind it, and how did somebody pull that number out of the air and say, yes, this is our quote-unquote limit for cannabis. But we also have to look at, and we don't have enough research or science behind this, but if we say 0.8 is the BAC limit and 5 nanograms is the THC limit, what about the combination of both? Where does that put us? And does 1 + 1 = 3 or 4? I don't know. I honestly don't know what the issue is on impairment and the level of impairment when you combine the two. What does 0.06 look like with 3 nanograms? I don't know. There's not enough research there. So I think the first thing our state highway safety offices can do is support our law enforcement agencies, maybe through their state chiefs associations, to get more officers trained as DREs.
Hello. We're over here to your left.
It's Noah,
Yes.
I'd like you to build me an ark.
All right. Quick question. As far as community policing, what's your concept as far as the effectiveness of citations versus verbal or written warnings? How do you feel that the impact and the improvement and the impression we make goes to that?
Excellent question. And part of the answer to that is not just whether an officer chooses to issue a citation or not, it's how the officer chooses to issue a citation. Again, I go back to professional traffic stops. It's how we deliver the message. Again, our goal is to change driver behavior. Sometimes the officer knows through their experience that can be done with a verbal warning or a written warning. But remember what a traffic citation does. It not only holds the driver accountable for their actions and hopefully changes driver behavior, but it also tracks that violator's traffic history. So without the citation, next time my officer stops Joe Smith for speeding, Joe Smith's got no tickets on their record, must be a really good driver, give you a verbal warning. Well, that's happened 5 times in a row. There's no enforcement history behind that driver. So that's part, I think, of the issue. There was a story in the Chicagoland area several years ago where a driver was going over 100 miles per hour, caused a horrific crash, and they looked back at the number of times this driver was stopped based on a license plate search, and it was ridiculous. Like 55 times this driver was stopped, and enforcement action was only taken half the amount of time, and every single time there was a court supervision in court, because it's Cook County, and there wasn't one single conviction on this driver's record. That's incredibly unfortunate. Now, law enforcement, we still need to do our part. Just because another part of the criminal justice system fails on us doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to do our part. But again, we have to go back to the basics. We're here to change driver behavior. We have officer discretion. We don't want to take that away. But remember what a traffic ticket does. It actually makes it a part of the driver's record so we know past behavior. Thanks.
Thank you for a great presentation. My research involves in the crash data location accuracy in South Carolina, and when I check data, most crashes end up on ocean, parking lot, So my question is the law enforcement taking any national level educating police officers, in terms of pinpointing exact location, which would help in future for the predicted crashes?
Some law enforcement agencies are doing a much better job at that than others. There are many law enforcement agencies using technology over the last several years to pinpoint locations of crashes with GPS technology. So we know it's not just at this intersection, but where at this intersection. So I'll give you an example. I did my former agency, I did some research because the Chicago Tribune did a story that said, and they used to do this every year, so the top 10 worst crash locations in the state of Illinois. And an intersection in my community in Hoffman Estates was listed as the #1 worst crash location in the state of Illinois. I'm like, what? Really? I mean, I know the intersection. So I started looking at how good are we tracking the exact location of our crashes and the causative factors of the crashes, et cetera. So I found it a little disturbing that, for example, if my officers investigated a crash that was westbound approaching the intersection but was maybe 150 feet back from the intersection, our records section to classify and target that location made it an intersection crash. Well, no, it's not. That's not an intersection crash. That's way back from the intersection. But that's how they located it. So there were a lot of crashes that didn't happen in the intersection that were logged in as the intersection, which made that the worst in the state. However, here's how it got worse. I called up the Chicago Tribune reporter and I said, what makes you think this is the worst crash location in the state of Illinois? And they're like, I don't understand the question. We just got the top 10 and Illinois DOT gave us these numbers. I go, but why do you think that's the worst crash location? I'm like, well, I still don't get it. It's #1. You had the most crashes. I go, well, okay, let me ask you this then. How many of those crashes were fatal crashes? Well, I don't know. Well, how many were personal injury? Well, I don't know. I said, what if I told you that of all the crashes at that intersection, not a single one involved a fatality or any personal injury? They were all property damage crash only. But let me tell you that crash location #3 on that list, over 50% of the crashes at that location were either fatality or personal injury. Now, which is the worst location? Oh, well, I never thought about it that way. That's right. Let me pose another question. What if I told you that my intersection, which is #1 on your list, has 270,000 cars a day go through that intersection, but the #5 on your list only has 29,000 cars a day that goes through the intersection? Now, which is the worst location? Which intersection do you want to drive through on your way to work? Because you got a much better chance of getting hit over here than you do in my intersection. So it's more than just numbers, and that's what data will tell us. We need to dig deeper into the data than just say, here are the numbers, and this is the worst location. No, it's not. It really isn't. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to piggyback on that. I'm one of those people, the evaluators, that has to turn the garbage into something that's not so garbage-like. I want to know your thoughts on, is it a matter of changing crash reports so that we can get better data? Or is it a matter of encouraging our wonderful and hardworking law enforcement officers to remember that this is data and that all things that they see and do on roadside while they're trying to protect people and protect themselves and not get run over is going to affect all the programming that we have? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the crash reporting system we have right now is very good. I think it comes down to training police officers, reminding them every day how important this data is, how the data is used, which a lot of police officers never hear about. I'm trained by my field training officer. I got to fill in the blanks, take enforcement action when necessary. And again, many officers do the who, what, when, and where. They forget about the how and why, which is really the important part of the data, and the importance of taking enforcement action and documenting not only the violation, but documenting this is why this crash happened at this location. And if we continue to look at this data, and this is what, as police chiefs, I share this with my officers. I'm not sure that all police chiefs do this, but on a quarterly basis, I share all of our crash data analysis with all of my officers at roll call. Hey, guys and gals, here are our top 5 locations in the last quarter for crashes. Here's where they happened, here's why they happened. And here's the driving maneuvers that caused it. Now, here's a key point. Go to those 5 locations and observe these violations and take enforcement action before the next crash at that location occurs. That's part of the value of crash data analysis. Not just saying, okay, now we know. What do you do with the data now that you know? You educate the public and you take enforcement action based on that data. You have to share that with your line police officers so they understand the importance of the data and then what's done with that data. Hello again. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the chief not only for giving a wonderful presentation and taking the time to answer your questions, but also for providing a very unique intro, which makes me feel a little better about my hat selection this morning, I've got to say. I think we could be fast friends, Chief, but I don't smoke cigars, so sorry about that. It is a Lifesavers tradition to call attention to a preventable traffic safety problem. The mission moment serves not only to remind us of why the work we do is so important, but also to give a face to the thousands of people who lose their lives in traffic-related incidents every year and their grieving loved ones left behind. Melissa Wandel is president of the National Coalition for Safer Roads and founder of the Mark Wandel Foundation. Days before their only child was born, Melissa's husband was killed by a red light runner. As a devoted advocate committed to reducing the number of injuries and deaths caused by traffic collisions, she was instrumental in passing Florida's Mark Wandel Traffic Safety Act in May 2010, which allowed communities to use red light cameras at intersections to help combat the preventable problem of red light running. She has also led the fight to prevent the repeal of the law to retain Florida's life-saving red light camera program. She is an active campaign ambassador for Alert Today Florida, a Vision Zero champion, and was recognized by the National Safety Council as a 2016 Distinguished Service to Safety Award winner. It is my honor to welcome a dear friend of mine and a truly inspiring safety leader. Please welcome Melissa Wandel.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful to be here today. And thank you to all of the wonderful people, such as Kathy, that have championed my advocacy over the years. You've shared your love with me and inspired me to keep moving and keep going so that we can drive down heartache on our national roadways. I am grateful, through the grace of God, that I am standing here today. And my hope is that you will find my story useful and that you will find my story impactful. October 24th of 2003 was a day that will be etched in my life forever. It's a day that never goes by without thinking of it the first thing when I wake up in the morning. And it has really, truly changed my life in a multitude of ways. It was the last day that I was able to spend that day with my husband. We were 9 months pregnant, and I had called my husband in the morning. He was working. He was a financial advisor. And I had said, hey, let's go out to dinner tonight. Let's celebrate. I live in Bradenton, Florida, and I used to drive over the Sunshine Skyway Bridge every day. And he just didn't like me having to go over that big bridge. If anybody knows Florida, they know the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. And so I had made the decision that day without letting him know that, okay, I'm 9 months pregnant today. I'll wrap up things at work and start working out of my home. So I called him and I asked him if he wanted to go out to dinner. And he was so excited because being 9 months pregnant, through my whole pregnancy, I couldn't stand the smell of food. I felt my legs were swollen, my ankles were swollen, and I told my husband, I said, you know what, I'm not going to be able to go out to eat. And he said, but Melissa, we had these plans, and I was really excited to spend the night with you going out to dinner. And I said, we've got plenty of time to go out to dinner. I said, why don't you and Phil go out and grab a bite to eat, and then when you come home, we'll spend time together. And he said, but Melissa, I love you, and I'm going to miss you. And I said, silly, I'll see you in a little bit. Well, not less than 2 hours later, I got a phone call that there was a horrific crash just a mile from our home. That there was a crash that involved 3 vehicles. My brother was seriously injured, and they weren't sure if my husband was going to make it. So imagine being 9 months pregnant. And I still remember today looking at one of my dogs and just looking and saying, you know what, when I get back into this house, I know that something is not going to be the same. And I got in my car, and the mile drive down to the end, and to the intersection, and I just pleaded with God. I said, not now, God, please, please don't take him, not now. But when I got to the scene, there were lights and sirens everywhere, and the world just stopped. I knew I was getting ready to enter a territory that I really didn't want to be in, but I also knew that I had to stay calm. I had to make sure that I take care of this life that was growing inside of me that was to be born any day. And when I got there, they were working on my husband. And I heard these howls, this cry. My husband 6'2", my brother 6'4". And I just heard these cries, these horrific cries that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And it was my brother. And they were trying to work on my brother, and my brother just said, Melissa, check on Mark. Is he okay? Is he okay? And I said, I'll check on him. I'm like, you just take care of yourself. You've got good people taking care of you. And when I turned to walk back to go check on my husband, they had pronounced him right there at the scene. To have to go back and to be able to share with my brother that my husband had just lost his life, it was horrific. My brother, the driver, my husband, the passenger, they were on their way home from dinner. They were stopped at a red light. My brother went left on a green. A driver traveling over 50 miles an hour ran the light. The light had been red for a half a mile. At the scene, I was able to say goodbye to my husband. I promised him that I would make a reason for what happened right there that night at that intersection. I promised him that I would take care of our baby, that she would be a happy baby, that she would be born into love, and that she would have fortitude, and that she would absolutely 100% know who he was in this lifetime. My husband was more excited to be a father than I was to be a mother, and I was very excited. We didn't know if she was going to be a boy or a girl. He knew from day one that she was going to be Madison Grace. 19 days later, a few days after the crash, I said goodbye to my husband. 19 days later, Madison Grace Wanda was born. And when I held her in my arms, I promised her a life of love. I promised her that she would know who her daddy was. And I promised her that together we would make a reason for what had happened at that intersection. I made her the same promise that I made to my husband. She and her daddy deserved to meet on this earth. The course of my little family no longer was on the same path. But you know what? It was time for heartache and wisdom to collide to make this tragedy meaningful. Moving forward, a couple months later, we went to court. And we were in traffic court, along with vehicles that had too much load, landscapers that had too much load in their trucks. And we were sitting there, the judge didn't even know what to do with us. We went up, I took my daughter with me, she was 3 months old at the time, and I went up and I stood next to the woman. It was a 29-year-old woman that had her own child in the vehicle that night, but thank God that child was in a safety seat. And when we went into court, I told this, I was able to speak to her for the first time, and I said, I have no idea what has happened in your life, but I hope from this day forward that you drive safer because you could have taken your own child's life that night. This woman had 10 points on her license, 7 previous violations. She had been to traffic school 3 times. She had had her points adjudicated every single solitary time. She should have had 22 points on her license by the time that she ended up in court. 1 year prior, she ran a red light. This time, when she ran the red light, she not only took a ticket, but she took a life. I left her there in hopes of her own personal recovery. Being a violator has to suck the life out of someone. So what do you do when you have this elephant sitting on your lap, right? It's big and it's heavy. And if you don't move it, it's gonna crush you. And there was no way I was gonna let this elephant crush me. There was no way I was gonna be a broken mommy. There was no way I was gonna let the love that my husband and I shared just go by the wayside because of this crash. I needed to find a way to retrain people's brains on how to stop again. I couldn't look to the courts for that. And now listen, and here's the thing. I don't want anyone to go to jail. I simply want people to understand what they've done so that they can make better choices and sustain life on our national roadways. Thank you. Thank you. And so I started truly researching, what is it that people are doing out there? What are other states doing? Research. I researched and I came up with automated enforcement. I started seeing what communities were doing around the country. So I wanted to know, what is this automated enforcement? Well, about 5 miles from where I live, there used to be a company called Peak Traffic. I literally walked into Peak Traffic and I said, tell me about these red light safety cameras. Tell me what they do. Tell me how they work. Tell me why they work. Why are they saving lives around the country? And so they started showing me, and I thought, this is the way that we can retrain people's brains on how to stop. So I reached out to my local representative. My local representative hooked me up with the Manatee Chamber of Commerce. My Chamber of Commerce got involved. I got involved with senators that started understanding why we were doing what we were doing, how we were losing loved ones on our roadways. at our intersections, it was negligent and it was preventable. So how can we come together with law enforcement, education, advocacy, and automated enforcement? How can we put all of this group together and start saving lives? I started speaking at Lions clubs, churches, I went to Rotary, I went to anybody that would listen, and I started to talk to them about highway safety. Here's one little piece of advice too. If there's any advocates out there, or anybody that has a cause, most of the time when we're advocating for something, it's because we are 500% compassionate about it, right? We're so compassionate about it, we know that our cause is gonna save lives. But you know what? We have to have critical knowledge. You have to look to people, and knowledge is power. You have to take that compassion, and you have to take that critical knowledge, and that combination is gonna sell your cause. If you don't have one or the other, you can fail. And if you don't have critical knowledge, policymakers, journalists, they're gonna eat you up. And so you have to make sure, if you're out there and you really want your cause, you have to make sure that you 100% have that backbone behind you. So the gears were set in motion. In 2004, the Mark Wandel Traffic Safety Act was being assembled. I learned so much about the meaning of and or when it comes time to a bill, right? I learned what a tough job a lobbyist really has, and how you have to have nothing less than authentic people around you, how you literally have to do the Michael Jackson when you walk out of a policymaker's office, and how you must have compassion for the misunderstanding of these policymakers, of their views. I had a senator asked me, he said, Melissa Wandel, do you really think that a camera would have saved your husband's life, right? And I said, obviously they didn't see that I was looking forward and not backwards. May 13th, 2010, after 6 years of education advocacy, my husband's life-saving legacy, the Mark Wandel Traffic Safety Act was born. Lives would be spared. But this special bill does so much more than save lives at our intersections. My husband's life-saving legacy is in the work of many programs in the state of Florida. Please watch this amazing bill and this amazing video and watch as my husband's life-saving legacy unfolds. Please show the Miami Project video.
In Florida, the benefits of red light cameras extend beyond public safety and into the world of cutting-edge science. May 2010, Florida's then Governor Charlie Crist makes it official, signing the Mark Wandel Traffic Safety Act into law. It caps a 5-year effort led by Mark's widow, Melissa.
This has always been about making sure that Mark's memory lives on, that we make sure that we make a difference for what happened that night just a quarter of a mile from our home.
Mark Wandel was killed by a red light runner just 2 weeks before Melissa gave birth to their daughter, Madison.
I knew that red light running was preventable. I knew that it was a tragic crash, and I didn't want it to happen to anyone else.
Under the Wandel Safety Act, cities are allowed to install traffic cameras to catch drivers who run red lights. It also calls for a portion of the fines to go to a specific and meaningful purpose. $10 of every fine supports local trauma centers around the state, while another $3 goes here, to a world-class research center at the University of Miami, called the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis. Inside the 7-story building, more than 200 scientists, researchers, and clinicians work on the latest breakthroughs in spinal cord and brain injuries. From cell therapy to hypothermia, they pioneer efforts to speed recovery from traumatic injuries. They also develop innovative approaches to rehabilitation for improved function. All this takes a lot of money. Science is expensive. The Wandel Safety Act has already provided the Miami Project with $2 million in just 18 months.
The Miami Project simply is the most comprehensive spinal cord injury center in the world. And our mission is to find more effective treatments and ultimately a cure for brain and spinal cord injuries and other neurological diseases and disorders.
Mark Bonaconte is the son of Miami Dolphins Hall of Famer Nick Bonaconte. As a boy, Mark dreamed of following in his father's footsteps. He was doing what he loved most when tragedy struck during a college game 26 years ago. Mark's father, Nick, vowed he would do everything he could to help his son walk again, and the Miami Project was born. Over the years, Mark has become the driving force behind fundraising efforts to support both laboratory and clinical research at the center.
Every year, there's 10 to 12,000 injuries in the United States alone. People with spinal cord injuries. And still, by far, the majority of those injuries are caused by automobile accidents. And it's devastating.
This is a really exciting time in paralysis research. We have been working for over 25 years to understand paralysis, and now we think we have the tools and maybe cell therapies to actually target paralysis and make a difference in people's lives.
The money from the Wandel Safety Act is already having a major impact, taking the dream of finding a cure for paralysis one step closer to reality.
This is the difference between walking next year or walking in 5 years or even later. I mean, every dollar counts, so you can imagine the importance of this money coming into the project. I've never been more excited in my life about what we're doing, and I've never been more optimistic in a cure.
And so as you can see, as today, we've taken in $51 million for the trauma centers and $15 for the Miami Project to cure paralysis. And we are so excited about the bill and what is being done in the state of Florida. And since 2010, though, the bill is being repealed every single solitary year. We even, on this Tuesday, it's up for repeal in the Senate again. We will never get to zero with our politicians behaving in this manner. Socially, emotionally, and economically, our communities cannot afford to have our politicians abusing their power in this way. We're simply working to drive down heartache on our national roadways. We must not shy away from the tough stuff. We must keep educating our policymakers and make them understand that human lives matter. My daughter will never know her father. When you ask her about her father, she gets a blank stare on her face. She just cannot come to terms with who he was in this lifetime. My brother, emotionally broken, will never be the same again. The ripple effect of roadway tragedy can be devastating. I see it every day. I choose for my ripple effect to be sustainable, impactful, and full of life-saving measures and with a touch of grace. If you tell me that I can't do it, I will politely and quietly tell you, just watch me, because human lives matters. Automated enforcement works. It is a proven tool that cuts down on roadway tragedy. Don't get tongue-tied when speaking about automated enforcement. Our policymakers must be on board with us, and they must be held accountable. They are the key to making our roads safer. We can implement all of these amazing ideas and all of these amazing programs, but we need them on board in order to do it. Together in this room, there's nothing that can stop us. We have critical knowledge, we have respect, we have kindness, we have personal accountability. If all road users possess these qualities, we have far less heartache, and accidents would just be accidents. But we have crashes, therefore we have a lot of work to do. But let's take that kindness, that love, that personal accountability, and that respect. Let's take that critical knowledge and collectively use our God-given talents, move forward together, and find ways always to save lives. We must reduce the risk. I love the quote from William Wilberforce. It really rings true with our policymakers. You may choose to look the other way, but you can never now say that you did not know. We have to be the change. Will you commit and be the change along with me? We will be the change. Can you say we will be the change? We will be the change. The power of one death. If somebody is listening today and they want to do something, but they're filled with doubt, they're filled with fear of failure, they feel that they just can't do it, they're haunted by that, I'm here to tell you that you can. I am a simple, ordinary person that embraced the love instead of loss. God gave me that love and helped me to bring people into my life to share that love and to save lives. You've got this, and what you don't have, we will get it together. I thank God for being here today, and I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my story. I hope that it was useful and impactful, and I'm grateful for those that truly heard me today and will be able to take my story and the story of thousands of people and go out and impact others and save lives. I hope today that you will help me this day moving forward to drive down heartache on our national roadways. I am grateful, and you are truly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Good morning. I'm Jason Sawala, the Executive Director of the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety, and it is our honor to host this life-changing event. I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, U.S. Secretary of Transportation Elaine L. Chao. Previously, she served as U.S. Secretary of Labor, the first Asian American woman in American history to be appointed to the President's Cabinet. She began her career in public service working on transportation issues at the White House. She then served as Deputy Maritime Administrator, Chairman of the Federal Maritime Commission, and Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Prior to the Department of Labor, Secretary Chao was President and Chief Executive Officer of United Way America and served as Director of the Peace Corps. The recipient of 37 honorary doctorate degrees, Secretary Chao received an MBA from the Harvard Business School. A resident of Jefferson County, she is the first Kentuckian to be appointed to the President's Cabinet since World War II. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Chao.
I should have put my sneakers on. Thank you, Jason, for that very, very nice introduction. And I want to thank you and everything that you do to make Kentucky's roads safer. So please tell your colleagues that we really, really appreciate them as well. And then you are so lucky to have been greeted by Kentucky's Transportation Secretary, Secretary Thomas. We, in fact, were in an eastern part of the state yesterday on some infrastructure needs. And so, Secretary Thomas, it's great to see you again, and thank you for the great job that you do for Kentucky. Now, you may notice that I'm referring a lot to Kentucky, and that is because you are actually in my hometown. So, welcome to Louisville, welcome to Kentucky. I hope that you've had a chance to kind of look around the city or just kind of walk around. It's a really, really wonderful city, very, very livable, and I hope that you're spending a lot of money because the city would really, really appreciate it. We also have here, obviously, the NHTSA administrator, Heidi King, and I'm going to refer to her later on as well. But Heidi will be with you until Tuesday, and so we want to hear from you. We want to hear your concerns, and we hope that you'll have a chance to meet all of the Department of Transportation's wonderful people, staffers who are here today. I am here because the men and women gathered here, that's you, at this conference are saving lives and preventing injuries every day. Behavioral changes, vehicle safety innovations, and improved infrastructures are key to preventing traffic crashes. It's actually as simple as that. I met one of your board of directors who was traveling from Washington to Louisville, and as we were talking, we were saying, we know what to do. The policies are very clear, but it's how do we build consensus? How do we get other people, everyone, to understand the importance of these keys to preventing traffic crashes? Again, behavioral changes, vehicle safety innovations, and improved infrastructure. Now, for several decades, there have been extensive ongoing safety efforts by government, law enforcement, advocates, and vehicle manufacturers. And together with many of you in this room who are such fierce advocates, they have been working to help people, to help make people safer drivers, to produce safer vehicles, and to improve infrastructure. When crashes occur, vehicle safety innovations, including seat belts, airbags, head restraints, and crumple zones, they've been shown to have improved the odds for survival. Tremendous advancements in emergency medical services and trauma care have also contributed to a reduction in traffic fatalities. Better EMS and trauma care have enabled many crash survivors to have better outcomes than that would have been in the past. And the results of all these comprehensive efforts to save lives have been extremely positive. Traffic fatalities have declined 32% since 1972. And that's pretty remarkable, especially considering that there have been a 153% increase in vehicle miles traveled. In fact, the fatality rate in 1972 was 4 times higher than it is today. But as we all know, no one here is going to rest on these laurels, and neither are we. Motor vehicle crashes in the US in 2017 killed 37,133 people. This includes 5,977 pedestrians, 5,172 motorcyclists, and 783 bicyclists. Nearly 3 million adults and children were injured, many in life-altering ways. And the annual economic cost of motor vehicle crashes in the United States is over $240 billion. But as we all know, the pain, the grief, and the suffering can't be quantified, and they're just not in the numbers. And they shouldn't be happening. That's the bottom line. These crashes are preventable. And in 2018, Americans are driving more than ever before. Americans are driving a record 3.2 trillion miles. And there are currently more than 222 million licensed drivers in the United States, nearly double the 112 million licensed drivers in 1970. Now, with more people on the roads than ever before, including pedestrians and bicyclists, it's never been more important for all road users to be sober and solely focused on safe travel. But distracted driving has entered the national lexicon because so many road users are fixated on their iPhones, on their iPads, and other things, instead of being focused on the road. And so local, state, and federal safety campaigns have got to be intensified, sustained, and creative, because it's so much harder to catch people's attention these days. And increasingly, impaired driving is a daunting challenge. Alcohol remains a major factor in traffic fatalities every year. And now we're seeing so many drivers using opiates, fentanyl, meth, heroin, and other drugs, including some over-the-counter medication. These all impair motor skills and judgment, despite what some may say. 30 states and the District of Columbia has enacted laws that increase access to marijuana. Law enforcement and policymakers are challenged by the fact that there's so many drugs and so many variables in terms of how their active ingredients may impair an individual's driving performance. And NHTSA is spearheading several initiatives and working with partners and stakeholders to reduce drug-impaired driving. And NHTSA's acting administrator, Heidi King, who you'll hear from later on, has hosted meetings all around the country to hear from the experts confronting these issues in our communities. Law enforcement bears most of the burden of detecting drug-impaired driving. I mean, NHTSA continues to work with partners to develop and support training tools, and these include the Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving Enforcement and Drug Recognition Experts. These programs help to train officers to identify symptoms of impairment by different categories of drugs. These programs need to reach as many committed officers as possible. And our nation needs more drug recognition experts in our police departments. And the nation needs more support for traffic safety resource prosecutors as well. They're valuable because they're the legal experts who support the local prosecutors and district attorneys and law enforcement confronted with increasingly complicated impaired driving cases. Law enforcement are dedicated in what they do. They care about their work. And if they spend so much time enforcing, and then those enforcements are arbitrarily thrown out in court, that is a real disincentive to the law enforcement and a real disservice to them as well. So we've also have to increase public awareness efforts. Last fall, NHTSA launched a new campaign, and it says, if you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. And this is what I hear a lot from law enforcement. They say that this is confusing, the recent spat of laws loosening up use of formerly forbidden drugs. Because people will think, well, I can smoke, or I can take this drug. Yes, you can in certain states where it's allowed. But that doesn't mean that you can drive while impaired, or that you can smoke and drive. So that's a big distinction that I think is hard for us to get the news out. But decades of experience in highway safety have proven that public service educational campaigns backed by tough enforcement, tough laws, effective enforcement can change behavior and save lives. So the Department of Transportation, under the leadership of Heidi King, will continue to invest in these campaigns to improve road user behavior. This is an issue that Heidi will tell you she feels very, very strongly about. She is personally dedicated to these campaigns, to your efforts, and she wants to be a partner with you. And we at the Department of Transportation support her to enable her and NHTSA to be that partner for you. One of the aspects of traffic safety, which is deeply concerning, is the increase in responder fatalities. There have been 22 responder fatalities since January of this year. It's not yet known how many injuries have occurred, and these are firefighters, EMS personnel, law enforcement officers, towing and recovery personnel, and transportation and public work personnel. The 21st responder fatality of 2019 occurred on Thursday. A 34-year-old Illinois state trooper, Brooke Jones' story. She was conducting an inspection on a tractor trailer when she was struck by another semi-truck. Trooper Jones' story's husband is a retired police officer who now has to endure and help their family to endure this awful grief and their loss. And then just yesterday, Illinois State Trooper Gerald Ellis was killed by a wrong-way driver, leaving his wife and 2 children behind. These horrific, needless tragedies have got to stop. And you know that, because that's what you work for every single day. But efforts to enforce and educate about move-over laws must be stepped up, and the department wants to help with that. Addressing these dangers to crash responders is one of the reasons that the department's Federal Highway Administration developed the National Traffic Incident Management Responder Training Program. Nearly 400,000 responders have so far received the training, and Federal Highway's goal is to train well over 1 million responders. So your partnership and continued support is very important. And the training is available in all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico, and it can be done online or in person. And this collection of data through crash reports is vital to improving traffic safety. And the collection of secondary crashes is now recommended in the Modal Minimum Uniform Crash Criteria. Although secondary crashes are often more severe than the original crash, there's not yet sufficient understanding of the phenomenon. And increasing the collection of secondary crash data will also help in addressing the tragedy of responders being killed or injured in the line of duty. All of this under Federal Highways is under another wonderful woman leader at the Department of Transportation, and we have a lot of them. Her name is Brandy Hendrickson, and she's been acting administrator for the Federal Highway Administration. So I hope you get a chance sometime to meet her as well. But the department has launched a safety data initiative to integrate data sources with each other and with new big data sources that are becoming increasingly available. And the current tools around safety data were created in the 20th century. So we worked with Congress to secure funding for this new safety data initiative. It builds upon the department's capacity to utilize productive data to identify and mitigate the systemic factors contributing to serious crashes. Research is also ongoing, and that's really important as well, because research will help us to better understand the relationship between roadway design, traffic volumes, speed, and crash outcomes. The department is also focused on improving pedestrian and bicyclist safety through infrastructure design. But as you all know, as we talk about all of this, as far as we have come, more still needs to be done. For example, converting a two-way stop-controlled intersection to a roundabout can reduce severe crashes at that location by 82%. And infrastructure countermeasures, such as rumble strips, something as simple as that, will alert drivers so that they may recover from their error in time to avert a crash. But even more modest measures are needed, and some of them are not inexpensive. And that's why the administration has pushed for a substantial, sustained, and comprehensive commitment to boost infrastructure in our nation. Our country is in one of the most exciting transformational periods in transportation history. New technologies are being developed that has the potential to save lives, revolutionize travel and commerce, and provide better mobility options for underserved communities, such as the elderly and people with disabilities. Some potentially transformative technologies, like self-driving cars, are still in the early phases of development. A fully autonomous or self-driving vehicle, for example, exists primarily now in limited and controlled circumstances. And the department's approach to regulating these automated driving systems, self-driving cars, stress collaboration, cooperation, and transparency. And the potential of this technology to increase safety is very big, because research have shown that 94% of accidents occur because of human error. But the promise of automated vehicles, self-driving cars, I never use the word driverless cars, because research actually shows that that actually increases the anxiety of the people. So 71% of our population are anxious about getting into a car, a self-driving vehicle, without a human being. And if you use the word driverless cars, that number actually goes up to 74%. But the promise of automated vehicles will never be realized if the public does not accept this. And if the public does not have confidence in the safety, security, and privacy of this technology. And so I have challenged the AV companies and automakers to address these legitimate public concerns and assuage the public's anxiety about safety, security, and privacy. And as Secretary of Transportation, I think you know that safety is my top priority, and safety is the Department of Transportation's top priority. And this is Heidi King's top priority. Heidi's been a great leader for NHTSA. We are so grateful that she is here and that she's leading the department. We work together very closely on all these issues that you care about every single day. We in the government can't do it alone. It is only because of tremendously dedicated, committed, concerned advocates like you, who many have experienced heartbreak and grief and suffering because of what happened in your own lives. And so many of you have taken a tragedy in your own lives and turned it into something so positive for our country. And we are deeply grateful for what you do to ensure that all of us are safe on the roads. Thank you so much for what you do. We really, really care about it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great conference. And Heidi's going to speak later, so listen to Heidi. She's got a great message. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you so much, Secretary Chow, for sharing your compassion and your insights and your safety goals today. As we wrap things up, as sessions are soon to start, I would just like to ask the 50 Lifesavers traffic safety scholars to stand and be recognized. Their names and schools are listed in the printed program, and you can identify them by the orange ribbons on their name badges. Yesterday afternoon, the scholars learned about traffic safety career opportunities from a panel of young professionals and then networked with leaders from federal and state government agencies and NGOs at a reception held in their honor. I've had the pleasure of meeting with some of these undergraduate and graduate students, and I'm feeling optimistic about the new generation of safety professionals. During the conference, when you see a traffic safety scholar, please take a minute to chat with them, share information about the work you do, and offer your contact information to keep the momentum going. Before I close this morning's plenary session, if you haven't already, I encourage you to download the Lifesavers app. It gives you access to the complete conference program, will provide alerts about events, and is where you'll find the workshop evaluation form. Your feedback guides the planning process, so please take a few moments after each workshop to submit your evaluation. Lastly, whether you're a new or returning Lifesavers participant, we're glad you're here, and we hope you have a great conference. I encourage you to join with the planning committee, look for the people wearing the Lifesavers lapel pin, and tweet about your experience at #Lifesavers2019. The first workshop begins very shortly. Thank you so much for your attention, and enjoy the conference.